morning, Brad. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Yourself?
Doing good. Super excited to have you on the show today. You've got a lot of experience in a lot of different areas that I want to get your insights on. You've been a serial entrepreneur for quite a while. And for the listeners, can you kind of take us back and give us a little bit of a rundown on how you became an entrepreneur and where you started?
Of course. So I've been an entrepreneur all my life. And I literally mean that. The journey started when I was 6. My dad said, "Do you want a new bike or a computer?" And I didn't know what a computer was, but I already had a bike, so I said computer. Then this personal computer came into our house and changed my life forever. Because at those days, this is 3.5 decades ago, there were no app downloads, no free software, nothing that you could actually access through the computer. It was all cassette tapes and discs and floppy disks and all that good stuff that doesn't exist anymore. But you had to actually go and physically buy software to run it on your computer. I don't know if you can relate to that, but in that paradigm, I realized really quick that the 3 pieces of software my computer came with could only entertain me for just a few weeks, and started looking to do more with this box that's set and had a keyboard on it. And I started programming as a result. I bought a book about, basics of programming, got a little bit more advanced, and I really enjoyed it. I was passionate about it. So I started programming, which turned into a software business because one of the first business software I wrote was widely, accepted and used by retailers, and that started my journey as an entrepreneur, not by design or because I was a brilliant businessman, but just because I stumbled across this box that could do whatever I told it to do as long as I knew how to speak its language, which I quickly learned. So that was my first foray into entrepreneurship, creating software, sales of software, distribution. And it was fascinated because I was just fascinated by this device. I upgraded my systems almost every year and got better at programming, learned different languages. I think I started with BASIC, then jumped to Fortran, C. I even took it to the level of coding directly into the computer with machine language for Motorola 68,000 series chips. So that was my beginning. And then that excitement around creating a brand new business and taking an idea and turning it into something people care about and want to pay you for continued after I finished my higher education and college studies. I started another business. That one didn't really take off. We pivoted. It took off much stronger after the pivot. Exited that one, wanted to learned sales, started another consulting business this time. It wasn't in the technology, but I've always had this fascination with hardware and software, and that drove the quest to become a better entrepreneur and lately become an investor, a better investor, and a better resource for the projects I get involved with.
That's awesome. I mean, what an evolution. I think, the experience you've had on a lot of those different fronts, we can dive into a little bit. And because I want to maybe end with some of the things that you're doing in today's technology, but Brad, when you had sold the software business and you had these different various businesses, what was the things, first of all, what were the ideas or things that you experienced as you were exiting? How, the software business, how was that valued versus like the consulting company? What were some of the things that triggered you to sell them? And then what were some of the takeaways that you had?
Well, I had 2 interesting experiences exiting a business. First one was out of pure necessity. I was 15 and I wanted to focus on my studies because the software business that I had accidentally built became a little too big to be managed by me or the people involved, the team. So that wasn't a planned one. It was more like, do I want to quit school and focus growing this business, or do I want to focus on school? I chose schooling because I knew there was a lot more to learn than writing code and selling it to people who enjoyed using it and benefited from it. So that was a short planning phase. It was a small exit. There wasn't a lot of tax planning or any of the necessary steps that now, knowing what I know now, I would recommend people do. So that was quick. Again, I exited the business, focused on my studies, and it was great because it was a really good learning experience. The second exit I had was even less planned, but at least I was acutely aware of tax repercussions in what would happen if I had a big check land on my lap, because I had already been working. Mind you, the first one, I was in school. I didn't have any working experience. The second one was after I finished my college studies and had a better idea, how the government wanted to do things in the context of, taxation and what they're looking for. So the second one, we did a little bit more planning because we had time to entertain the offer and respond to it. It was our beta client that said, we want to buy you. This technology is amazing. And we can go into what the technology was. But briefly, it was a big data play that predicted future purchases of the existing clients of big box retailers. But because we had at least 6 to 12 months to plan for it, although it went a lot faster, we were able to create the structure internally as well as on a personal level to minimize certain things that help in the long run. Because if you suddenly, if you're making a couple $100,000 a year, you're doing great, and suddenly you receive, as you know, a really large check, you could be giving more than half of that to the government. Before you even receive it, like before it lands into your account, there may be an inquiry waiting there if IRS is doing their job well in tracking these things. And of course, I'm all for paying my taxes and being in good standing with the government that supports us with infrastructure and everything we take for granted. But obviously, a little planning goes a long way, and if you can maybe reduce that in half, why not do it? So we worked with a couple mentors who were in the taxation space, tax accountants, and they created a structure where we weren't being hit with that immediate sales tax or capital gains tax off the bat, and we were able to do a more phased approach and manage that liability and responsibility accordingly.
What was the actual structure? Was it different like entity or corporate structures, or is there like advanced estate planning and trusts involved, or what was something? If you don't mind explaining a little bit more.
So at that time, I did not realize how favorable our tax code is to companies as opposed to individuals.
Mm-hmm.
As an individual, there are several things that you cannot even consider an expense or write off, whereas for a company, it's a no-brainer. So, for example, legal fees. If you have high legal fees as an individual, you can't write them off on your individual taxes. If you have any legal fees as a business, it's an expense. So that comes right off the top of your taxes when it's being calculated. Mm-hmm. So things like that. Just as much as I recall, I mean, this was couple decades ago, but we ended up doing other business entities that instead of individual or ownership, we distributed ownership for each partner to other entities, and then when the exit happened, the payout hit those accounts, mm-hmm. which wasn't a personal So we paid the minimum capital gains tax on it because that was the first money into those entities, which delayed the higher tax amounts
Mm-hmm.
from being held on that transaction. And then that distributed model also taught me that I can have a business that pays for a lot of things in my life without having to uh, get that money out as a person, as an
Mm-hmm.
individual. So since then, I always had a holding company that pays for things and makes sure me and my family are in good shape. At the same time, managing the taxation slightly better than I would be able to do by myself as an individual.
It's amazing. The more moving parts you have, the more strategy you have behind that. It's amazing. Like you said, it's crazy favorable if you've got the right strategy in place.
Yeah, I mean, there was some estate planning. Obviously, at that time, I was in my early 20s, so estate planning really didn't make much sense. I mean, later on in life, I think I may lean more towards building a trust fund and do more estate planning in that regard, as opposed to keeping things as liquid as possible, but in a corporate structure. But at that time, it made sense to just go in the direction of turning it into a business transaction, and again, paying the appropriate taxes for that transfer, and still having full access to
the funds and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So, kind of curious because obviously, what you had built in your business with the coding or the intellectual property was extremely valuable for your beta client to reach out and want to purchase you. Maybe what are some of your insights on, did you intend or did you foresee that to happen when you were building it? Was it more about the passion, or was it more about, you knew you're going to eventually sell this and, you had someone else in mind and they came to the table first? What was the kind of the triggering event in your mindset going into it?
Again, I was actually disappointed at that event because I wanted to go out and sell my product and learn how to sell this and become a better salesperson because I believed in the product. So I've never started a project or maybe invested, but personally, I've never started a project where my goal was to exit. If your only purpose starting a business is exiting, I think you're going to have a rough patch until that exit comes, because all you're going to focus on is, oh, I need to do this and I need to get to this revenue and this valuation and then find these clients. Now, some advanced planning for an exit and understanding how you can exit is absolutely a must. I'm not diminishing the value of some advanced planning and foresight into it. If the only reason you're starting a new, phone business is to sell it in 3 years or 5 years, it's not going to be a fun journey. And I've always got involved because I really wanted to work with the people that I got involved with because I valued them as friends or as business partners, or I was extremely passionate about what I was doing.
Yeah.
Same as now. Like I work 16-hour days now and 7 days a week, and not one day feels like I'm working. I mean, people say, oh, you're working too much because they see me being productive 7 days of the week and they know they can call me anytime. But I don't feel like, oh, I have to go to work. And I think if your sole purpose is to make money or sell something, I think it's going to, again, I've never been in that situation, so I don't know personally. But to me, it feels like that's going to feel very burdensome and angst ridden until you reach that point where you can exit.
I think you said that really well, Brad, because it's almost the private equity firms or some angel investors or VCs, it's like the sharks, right? Where it's just about the money and it's not about the people, the product, the community, the clients, which, it becomes very cold at that point, where the goal is to have a passion and a purpose in the community, but then also understand the technical ways that you can actually get yourself out so you're not trapped. But you have to be passionate, otherwise it's going to be just a miserable journey.
Yes. I mean, to answer your previous question, because I don't think I completely answered it, you do want to have a strategy around your IP. If you're developing IP, it's very important to understand what role that's going to play. Lately in the technology field, there's a lot of white labeling and licensing and shortcuts that people can take, which did not exist when I was,
Hmm.
writing code and developing things. But I think that could be an advantage at the early stages of any business. If you don't have to build the backbone of your business and you can just rent it, or if you don't have to buy a bunch of hardware, you can just put it on Amazon web servers and you're good to go. That jump starts you. But there is an inflection point where you are a business that has revenue, ideally profitable, growing, where you should start thinking about, well, what would be the impact of owning my own IP and developing the tools internally that I've been leasing or renting from other companies. Because that, if you don't ask yourself that question, you may have a $1 billion business that's running on Amazon Web Services, and when you go to sell it, you're not going to get $1 billion for it, because they're going to look at the revenue and your expenses and see, hey, Amazon is taking half of this $1 billion that's coming in, or whatever may be the case. Whereas if you catch that inflection point and you have the revenues or the investor support to build things internally, then you own them. And that's a very powerful position to be when you're considering an exit, because now you're not just a service business or a SaaS business, you are a technology company because you own your technology.
Perfectly said. Couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's a perfect segue into, some of your experience, because I think that inflection point that you're talking about, Brad, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily look at it like that, because there's so many service businesses out there or software businesses that, like you said, have been building either without the end in mind, which has a lot of challenges, and they're not necessarily understanding the value of building that IP or that technology themselves, and understanding how to become the technology company themselves. And there's a lot of challenges because the service business isn't as worth as much as you've got IP or systems or automation. You've migrated over from service to technology. So you want to maybe give us a couple examples that you've seen where people have successfully done that and what that's done to the business or how they go to market?
I knew this question was coming, so I've been thinking and jogging my memory. I think a very well known example of that is the rental company. I'm drawing a blank. What's
Renter's Warehouse, or you're talking about residential properties, or you're talking
no,
about
short term
Airbnb?
Airbnb.
Yep.
Airbnb is the prime example that popped in my head, because they have scraped and used Craigslist data, information, and users for the first 6 months or a year of their existence, because it was easier for them, instead of reacquiring those users and re-entering that data that already exists there, it was easier for them to scrape it, not build the same thing, build something superior on top of the data and structure that they piggybacked on. And then when the right time came, which was when Craigslist probably decided to take action, start building their own intake process. Because initially, when they were just scraping the data and bringing that in, there were quality issues with the images and issues with onboarding, because you're just getting raw data from someone else's site without necessarily their authorization. And that's not high quality data. But that launched the business for them. And once they reached that inflection point or critical mass where they had enough users, they could afford to send photographers to go get pictures, really professional pictures of the inventory that they have. And they could afford to advertise and onboard users directly to their site, which meant they had to build all that on the back end while they were doing this automated scraping, growth hacking when they launched. And that I think is a very understandable and clear example of I mean, I'm not recommending you scrape other people's sites in without their authorization and do that, but it's a very clever way to start a business without having too much investment in the services or the people or the back end. And once you reach the critical mass, to activate all those things which you've planned for. I mean, they understood that they couldn't just exist as a site that just scrapes data from Craigslist, because eventually they'll change their algorithms, their storage models, the way they serve things on the website, and that wouldn't be feasible, which happened, but they were prepared for it, and they just moved it to the next level as soon as that happened.
Well, and I think, it's a great example that everybody's aware of. And I think it's applicable to any industry and any company that starts in some sort of service, whether it's consulting or software, whatever it is, that, like there's software that you can white label, like you said, or you can integrate, some sort of platforms or something to change your business to make your products and services more valuable. But, understanding how to make that pivot from a service-based business to a technology business, I think scares the heck out of a lot of people, because they don't want to go recreate it, or they've heard of, someone hiring a coding company that'll then come in, it costs them forever, a bunch of stuff, but then it doesn't actually go to market and is actually viable. So it's a good way to kind of scale up and test the market in a minimal viable way without having to do the investments, like you said.
Yeah, and you can actually do a halfway approach where you build some of your technology that you definitely need to build. And we've done this with a couple projects where we would build the UI UX, which is the most important part because that's what people experience, and maybe build a couple features that we see as differentiators that don't ideally exist today out there in the industry we're trying to enter. And the backend use as much of the white labeling or available tools as we can. So it may be slower, it may not be the best technology for what we're trying to do, but it gets us through the first year of the company. And once we are done with the first year and there's a user base, there is an easier case to make to potential investors and to partners about rebuilding the backend to speed things up, to create more adoption, to be able to handle more users and more customers. That's an easier story to sell than saying, hey, I need $20 million seed because I'm going to build this amazing technology.
Right. And I think what's really cool is that this is applicable to, a lot of the software companies or the startups that are growing these days. But I actually think, Brad, that there's a huge opportunity for the up and down the street businesses, whether it's, HVAC or plumbing or any kind of service businesses that have a customer base. They've got a service or they sell products, but they don't have a differentiating technology platform to look at their customers and say, hey, what is it, the problems that they're going to be solving or that the customers are having, and being able to use their current cash flow and their current clients to kind of like bootstrap it together to become, like you said, a technology company. Have you seen any examples out there of people that are kind of combining both the traditional businesses and the software businesses, or, doing the kind of evolution that we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think an interesting, maybe not exactly what you're talking about, but an interesting example could be Geico. Geico used to be an insurance company that serviced government employees, hence the name. And they had a period where they had to either sink or swim because the newer insurance companies were attacking the whole insurance market with brand new technologies that enabled them to do things much faster and more efficiently from a cost perspective. So they rebranded and built this amazing website, and they completely rebranded themselves and opened it up to the whole general public in the country. And now it's one of the biggest insurance providers, as far as I know. I mean, I'm not following the insurance market closely, so I wouldn't be able to give you exact numbers, but their transformation from a brick and mortar insurance company to almost exclusively online now company that services a much larger portion of the population was, I think, very interesting to study and see, because without the technology they built, they wouldn't be able to do what they were able to do.
Well, and I think it's a really good example because it takes investment and it takes time and it takes looking more than just the short term to do the investment and do the pivot, like you said, because I mean, looking at the long term and seeing the competitive threats hopefully should kind of scare you into the innovation that you need to do, because otherwise one day it's just going to be too late and you are going to sink and you're not going to have the chance to swim, kind of like you said.
Same thing with Walmart. I mean, if we want to talk about recognizable names, Walmart has done the same thing. I don't remember what the latest numbers were, but Walmart started as a brick and mortar store, and now I think a considerable chunk of its sales is online through Walmart.com, and they were really late into the game. I mean, they just realized that was pretty much mandatory after Amazon started eating into their business and their market share. And again, they've implemented a pretty streamlined online presence, and I think that part of the business is growing and rest is shrinking.
Well, and I think that's a great example, and it's a nice little segue into some of your experience and where you focus most of your 16-hour days these days. And that's some crazy innovative technology that's got a lot of hype these days on from the Bitcoin to the cryptocurrency and the blockchain. And before we go straight into the jargon, the reason I want to dive into this, and I think you got a lot of insight, is because there's these technologies out there that are coming regardless of whether people want them to or not, and how it's going to change the landscape of how we do commerce and how the businesses operate today. I think you can, help shed some light on what's coming down the pipeline. So when people look at their business and they look about where they're going to compete, understanding what's going to be available and the opportunities out there, I think you'll be able to help us with that. So maybe if you want to just give us a little 101 of, where you live and how you interact in the blockchain world, and then also maybe a little bit of a 101 of exactly what it is.
Yeah, definitely. So blockchain is a distributed ledger technology. Ledger is, as you may know, if you took any accounting, a document where you keep track of your transactions. So money in, money out, loans in, loans out, whatever transactions your business has. A distributed ledger is just a fancy way of saying, instead of the digital ledger residing in one computer, bits and pieces of it reside on hundreds of computers. So there's a little bit of cloud computing kind of feel to it, but it's slightly superior to cloud computing because even cloud computing is not distributed. There are data centers and a lot of computers that do the computing for your cloud. With the distributed model, it could be my computer, your computer, someone's computer in England, another computer in Italy, and we all hold the same ledger, bits and pieces of it. And when there are changes, we all verify the change. So blockchain is effectively a technology that can disrupt every business model, every organizational model right now, because it eliminates the need for having a central authority or a central physical space to hold this valuable information. That's
it's huge.
I think that's the easiest way of putting it in perspective. And the name blockchain comes from the fact that data is written to this ledger in blocks that are chained to each other. So once one block is written, it becomes immutable and you can't change it. So you write a block and then a few computers verify it so that you're not putting false information onto the blockchain. And once that verification is complete, then you write the next block, but you chain it to the previous one, which locks the previous one in its state, whatever state it's in. So this way you have a decentralized computing phenomenon that's immutable. You can always track the transactions. No one is going to be able to go in and change past things or make false claims on whatever transactions were verified. And that, in Bitcoin's case, has allowed us to use Bitcoin as a store and transfer of value. Basically, any monetary instrument, whether it's gold coins, paper money, credit cards, or Bitcoin, is a storage and transfer of value tool. You know, if I have
Yep.
one gold coin, I know exactly what the value is because I can go and check what gold is worth and how much it weighs, and I know how much value is stored in that one unit that I have. Same thing with Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Because it's encrypted and it's very hard for third parties. There's a lot of news about Parity Wallet being hacked or things like that. That's different. There's always going to be shenanigans anytime you have something valuable that people are storing and exchanging. But aside from that, as far as the technology is concerned, everything is encrypted, and there's no easy way of me going into your computer or into your digital wallet and taking what you have in there. So I can't go in and take your Bitcoin out of your wallet unless you give me the key to do it. And so it creates this really interesting new paradigm where you don't need a government to back a paper currency. You don't need a bank to guarantee lines of credit or guarantee the transfer of the value you're storing with them. You can store the value on a small device the size of a USB stick and take it wherever you want with you. And when I say store value, there is no limitation to that value. So for the first time in the history, you can take $1 billion onto a USB stick, walk across the border, and exchange it for some local currency, and continue your existence without having to explain to anyone or go through anyone's trials and tribulations to wire your own money from one country to the other or do any of that. I mean, are there potentially negative uses of this technology? Absolutely. Any technology can be used for good or bad, but I firmly believe the good that's going to come out of this democratization of fundraising and being able to be financially independent, bankable, have access to loans and funds, that's going to change a lot of people's
Change our
lives.
world, change everything. It's so crazy, man. And this is why I think people don't know the ramifications of, and when you look at, first of all, the industries that could potentially dissipate because they're no longer the central authority that they might need, or they're the middleman in a lot of these transactions, because the whole economy, every business is based on goods and services being exchanged. And there's always people in the middle of that either monetize the exchange or make it more complicated. And, I mean, the how you extrapolate how this changes industries, or maybe what would be a good way to dive further into this is maybe give your explanation of the authorities and like what they do and the difference between like an authoritative system like this versus the decentral, and like how it would even just change and what type of commerce it would change.
Well, you put it really nicely. Disintermediation is going to be big in a lot of industries where there's a lot of middlemen, and with today's technology, it doesn't make a lot of sense why they're there, to be honest with you. The simplest example is a real estate transaction. So right now, if you wanted to buy or sell real estate, there is at least 5 different parties that you need to pay as well as interact with in the United States. That's you need to have an escrow agent. You need to have a broker. You need to sometimes have 2 brokers because each party has their own team in place. Then you need to have a title agent. You need to have a person who carries the documents because, by law, they need to be hand delivered or certified delivered, whatever it's called. I mean, there's 5-6 people that live, breathe, and make a living just through one transaction, which is I'm giving you money to get the deed of a property and the keys of a property from you.
Right.
So bring blockchain into the mix. Not Bitcoin, but Ethereum has something called smart contracts. And smart contracts are basically business contracts, right, written in code, and that can self-execute if certain conditions are met. So on the Ethereum blockchain, we can create a solution, and it's already been created, but we can create a solution where you say, I've escrowed this money, and escrowing of the money happens because if you use cryptocurrency, again, these are smart contracts and they can escrow themselves. So you send your Ethereum into a wallet. That wallet doesn't release it, but has a smart contract attached to it and says, okay, Brad, he sent his money. Now you go and give him the deed and the key. And you can even put the deed on a digital format on the blockchain. So automatically the deed goes to you and I give you the key. And as soon as I give you the key, you say, okay, I have it, and escrow is done. There's no other people between the two of us. It's peer to peer. So I gave you gave me your money. I gave you my property. And we both got what we wanted. There were no shenanigans. No one got ripped off. And it was done through 2-3 smart contracts.
And it's fully distributed, right? So then you can't change it.
It's transparent. It's fully distributed. You're not going back on anything. And there's no human error or judgment involved. It's just a piece of code that says if this amount of Ethereum is deposited to this address, then the deed that resides on this block of the chain gets sent to this address, and that's it.
Think really about simple. It's so mind-boggling, but then also exciting to think about. First of all, how many different industries could potentially go out of business in that one situation? Title companies, real estate agents, insurance. I mean, it touches everything because all we're doing is exchanging goods and services. And no longer, I mean, the paper, we used to own a copier business. You don't need paper for any of that stuff either. And It's just mind-boggling to think about. First of all, if you're in one of those intermediary businesses or you own a business like that, to think about when and how the life of your business will potentially change is one thing. But then also if you're in a business where a lot of that gets, it suffocates the profitability of your business because you're providing goods and services that you don't no longer need that kind of information. Is there maybe some examples of some businesses that you can see or industries that you can see that will really thrive when they no longer have to deal with all of that logistical garbage?
Well, logistics. International trade is one of them, because right now international trade is commoditized. There's a fixed price on full-size containers, fixed price on half-size containers. People own these ships that can carry tens of thousands of containers. And I mean, that market is going down because by the time you have all the loading and unloading and tracking and everything happened, again, there's 5-6 entities that are touching the process and need to get some profit out of it. If you could put the whole thing on the blockchain and you can track and it's immutable, again, it's automated. Obviously, you would have to have some oracles, and Oracle is another piece of software node that interacts with things outside of the blockchain. So you could have a structure where all this is automated. And I know the shipping industry is going into automation quicker than we think because it's easier to just satellite captain the ships from one port to the other without having to rely on people on the ship doing it. Of course, you need to have some people for those emergencies and what have you. I mean, open seas, who knows what can happen. But aside from that, now we don't need people to know where they're going or captain a ship. It's all satellite tracking and command center kind of approach. One step further, you automate it more, you're going to unlock more profitability because now the whole transaction can be tracked on a distributed ledger on the blockchain and be much more secure than one party passing documents to the other. Those documents can be forged. Those documents can be falsified. You could have a lot of issues. And there's even now, because I've been involved with international trade at different times of my life, there's still containers getting lost. I mean, we don't know where they go because something happens, well, either intentionally or unintentionally, and your goods don't end up where they need to. And it's really hard to track because it's a very paper-driven and manual process. Now, if that were not to be the case, again, the cost savings on insurance and on payroll and things like that could amount to a significant change. Another industry that's going to get
disrupted,
very seriously affected is going to be financial services and banking. Right now, there's 2+ billion unbanked people in the world. And that's a huge problem because these people are still dealing with cash, still getting robbed, still putting their lives on the line to protect that money that they made or have because they don't have access to the tools that we take for granted in our country. Well, with blockchain, because you don't have to have a branch, you don't have to hire a bunch of people, you don't have to do a lot of the things that traditional banks need to do to verify identity and verify legitimacy of the funds and verify individuals and verify transactions, those people are suddenly going to be able to have access to loans, to financing, to accounts. I'm not saying bank accounts because I foresee those being digital wallets online somewhere, secure digital wallets where they can store the value they created. So they're not going to have the need to touch any paper money, which is much safer, and it's going to be much more enabling for them because for the first time, the real value those people create with their activities in their daily lives is going to be trackable. You know, with cash, you may make $50,000 somewhere in Africa, but you're stashing your cash in a pillow somewhere, and you're not reporting it to anyone for the fear of someone coming and taking it away from you. So no one knows what value you've created course of a year. So you don't get loans, so you don't get financing, so you don't get any help from any financial institution. Whereas if they knew you had 50 grand, they would give you a line of credit. They would give you a credit card. They would give you all these tools that really make transactional processes much safer and quicker.
Well, as you say, all of this stuff is literally, it's like the mundane bullshit that we all hate doing, which is exchanging of payroll, documents, tracking, all that stuff literally just kind of goes away. I mean, it's all the worst parts about owning a business is all the crap that you got to do in between it, other than just providing your goods and services to someone else.
Yes. So I'm a firm believer in the potential good that the blockchain technologies, maybe not any of the cryptocurrencies that we have today, because there may be a very rapid evolution of Bitcoin and Ethereum, and there are some really interesting ones coming up in the future. We may not even know what's going to be the next big blockchain structure and cryptocurrency that's going to change things for us, but I know the technology as a whole is going to be as disruptive, if not much more disruptive than what the internet did to brick and mortar businesses in the 90s.
Right. And I think, Brad, and I don't know if you've read the book Innovators by Walter Isaacson.
I don't know.
It's a really cool book, and for the listeners,
familiar.
Isaacson's the guy that wrote the book Jobs and Benjamin Franklin, etc. Yeah. And he brings the computer and the World Wide Web from ground up, and he explores the World Wide Web when it came out. I mean, there was like little microwebs, and they all got connected together, and then there was the Internet Protocol that kind of changed how everything was recorded and moved around. And and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just kind of my elementary view of it, where you've got the blockchain, which is kind of like the internet, infrastructure, but then you've got the cryptocurrencies that allow all that to happen. And that's kind of like the underneath of the World Wide Web, where once they took these little the DARPANET, and they connected everything, then it was like, okay, no one cares about the ARPANET or the DARPANET because it's the whole thing. And that's where like the web came from. And we're just trying to figure out what's the best way to exchange information. I don't know if that's somewhat accurate or.
No. I mean, it's an interesting viewpoint. Of course, when the different little networks connected and the IP protocol started governing everything, that opened it up. Right now, I don't think we're there yet with blockchain. There are a couple projects working on connecting different blockchains, but you're on the right track. As soon as more of the main blockchains are interconnected and talk to each other, that's gonna create more of a momentum for the adoption curve. But more importantly, internet became very widely used when we had the UI moment. Some people call it the Netscape moment. When Netscape came and people could access the internet without typing any lines of command and things like that, that really enabled mainstream adoption. And we're still waiting on our UI moment or Netscape moment in the blockchain space, where an interface so simple and attractive comes along that everyone wants to use it for whatever purpose. And then once that happens, that's going to bring everything together.
I love it. I know we're running short on time here, and I could keep going for hours, so I'll kind of wrap this up. But if there's, one thing that you would leave our listeners with, Brad, on how this kind of technology would, and how they view their current business that they own, and how the value of the business and their exit options will be impacted by some of this technology, what would be the one thing you'd probably either highlight or leave us with?
Well, I'm biased, but I've seen nothing but amazing return on anything blockchain since 2009 when I got introduced to Bitcoin. And I would highly recommend people with existing businesses, whether you're planning an exit or not, do some research on how this technology can impact your business and industry, and be on the forefront of that change. Because if you don't build it, you don't adopt blockchain, someone else is going to build it and disrupt your industry and your business. So while you have the subject matter expertise, you have still an advantage over the tech people who are looking into these things, and you have an opportunity to be a leader, however small you may be in your industry right now.
I love it. Brad, what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
You can email me at brad@crowdmentor.com. That's crowd with a K. Or you can tweet at me, send me a message. My information is out there.
Cool. And I'll put it in the show notes. Brad, absolutely had a blast on the show. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.